The wind screamed across the open plains, carrying with it the sting of ice and the silent cries of a land that had seen too much suffering. Snow lay thick over the fields, erasing all traces of life except for the deep, uneven tracks that led to a splintered fence. It was there, in the bitter grip of winter, that a young woman sat half buried in the snow, her white dress soaked and clinging to her frame, stained with both mud and blood. 3 newborn babies lay around her, their tiny fists trembling against the cold, their cries growing weaker with each passing moment. Rope bound her to a fence post, cutting into her skin, leaving deep red welts on her arms. Her face was a portrait of exhaustion, fear, and a haunting kind of resignation, as if she had already accepted that this frozen field might be her final resting place. Somewhere in the distance, the crunch of boots broke the silence, drawing closer, until a lone figure emerged from the swirling curtain of snow. A rancher, his face weathered by years of solitude, his coat heavy with frost, and his eyes fixed on her with something that was not pity but determination. If you believe in kindness, in the power of second chances, and in stories that remind us there is still good in the world, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corners. Your support helps keep these stories alive. The woman's name was Eliza, though in the small, hard-hearted town she had been reduced to whispers. That girl who bore nothing but daughters. Her life had not been easy before she married, but it became unbearable after. She had grown up in a poor family that struggled to keep food on the table, dreaming of little more than a life where she might have a home of her own and the safety of someone who cared for her. When she met Thomas, a man with a patch of land and the promise of security, she thought she had found that life. But Thomas carried the bitterness of generations past, and he wanted a son, an heir who could work the land, carry the family name, and prove his worth in the eyes of men like himself. When Eliza gave birth to her first daughter, he had been cold. When the second daughter came, he began to grow cruel. And when the third daughter was born, his cruelty turned to violence. On the day of her third child's birth, snow had begun to fall outside the small cabin where she labored. Instead of joy or relief, Thomas's face had darkened like the winter sky, and words sharper than any blade cut into her. By the time the night was over, she was too weak to fight back when he dragged her into the cold, tied her to the fence at the far edge of the property, and left her with the newborns in the snow. It was punishment, he said, punishment for failing him, for failing to give him the son he thought he deserved. Hours passed. The wind tore at her dress. Her fingers went numb, and the snow clung to her lashes until the world became nothing but a blur of white and gray. She tried to shield the babies with what little warmth her body still had, but she could feel their tiny bodies cooling beneath her arms. Miles away, in a lonely ranch house tucked against the tree line, Samuel Burke lived a quiet life. A man in his early 40s, he had spent years avoiding the world beyond his pastures, speaking only to the animals he cared for and the wind that whistled through the pines. The war had taken his family, and loss had taught him to keep his heart guarded. But that morning, a strange pull had urged him out into the snow to check the far fence line near the road. A place he seldom went in winter. That's where he saw them. A fragile figure bound to the fence, her head bowed, and 3 small bundles in the snow beside her. The sight slammed into him like a hammer to the chest. The snow was deep, but he ran, his boots pounding into the frozen ground, every muscle in his body burning with urgency. The closer he got, the more he saw, the deep bruises on her arms, the cracked lips, the way her body trembled against the ropes. The babies' cries were faint now, their skin dangerously pale. Samuel didn't think. He simply moved, untying the knots with shaking hands, wrapping his coat around the children, and lifting the woman into his arms. Her weight was almost nothing, as if the wind itself could have carried her away. The journey back to his ranch was a battle against time. Each step through the snow felt heavier than the last, but Samuel's grip never loosened. Inside the warmth of his cabin, he stoked the fire until it roared, found every blanket he owned, and worked to bring life back into those tiny bodies. He didn't ask questions, not then. There would be time for answers later. For now, there was only survival. Days passed before Eliza had the strength to tell him her story. Samuel listened in silence, his jaw tightening with each detail of her suffering. He had lived through his own share of grief, but something in her story cut deeper than anything he had known. She had been discarded by the very person who was meant to protect her, left to die because her children were not the right kind in the eyes of a cruel man. Samuel could not return her to that life. He would not. And so, when she finally asked what would become of her now, his answer was simple, steady, and resolute. "You're coming with me." Life on Samuel's ranch was not easy, but it was honest, and in time, it became a place of healing. The three little girls grew stronger, their laughter filling the once silent rooms. Eliza learned the rhythm of the land, the feeding of the animals, the mending of fences, the planting of seeds that would bloom come spring. And Samuel, a man who had once thought his heart was too broken to love again, found himself smiling more, speaking more, and dreaming of a future that didn't feel so empty. The town talked, of course. Whispers followed them whenever they went into the market, some judging, others curious. But Samuel's quiet strength and Eliza's gentle resilience began to change those whispers. People saw the way he protected her, the way she looked at him with gratitude and trust, and slowly, respect replaced suspicion. One evening, years later, as the snow fell gently outside, Samuel watched Eliza and the girls from the doorway. The firelight danced across their faces, and he realized that the family he thought he had lost had, in some unexpected way, found its way back to him. Eliza had been cast aside for giving life to three daughters, but in the warmth of the ranch house, those daughters were not burdens, they were blessings. If this story has touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support allows us to keep bringing real, emotional stories of kindness and second chances to life. And before we end, we'd love to hear from you. What part of this story stayed with you the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.